In this video, we will do the math portion of the ACT practice test. This is the Preparing for the ACT test published by the ACT.org. I'll provide a link to their website and a link to this test in the description of the video. The 60 questions on the 2020 to 2021 version are identical to the 60 questions in the 2019 to 2020 version and in the 2018 to 2019 version. It says that you should do these in 60 minutes, these 60 questions in 60 minutes. I am going to take longer than that because I'm going to cover the material in detail and I'm going to write down the steps on each problem. And so it's going to take longer than 60 minutes. So let's go ahead and start the problems. Question 1. Marcus's favorite casserole recipe requires 3 eggs and makes 6 servings. Marcus will modify the recipe by using 8 eggs and increasing all other ingredients in the recipe proportionally. What is the total number of servings the modified recipe will make? So I'm going to set up a proportion, and when I do that, we're going to do eggs per serving. So the number of eggs on top and the number of servings on bottom. It says that 3 eggs will provide 6 servings. And how many servings are we going to get with 5 eggs? So I'll put N as the number of servings. So that's the proportion that I'm going to set up. Notice that 3 over 6 is 1/2. So one quick way to do this is just to realize that 5 over 10 is also a half. So N is going to be 10. Another way we can do this is through cross multiplication. 3 times N, 3 times N is equal to 5 times 6, that's 30. So dividing both sides by 3 gives me N equals 10. So if you wanted to go through cross multiplication or by just noticing that this fraction is 1/2, and to get 1/2 here, you'd need N equals 10. Either way is fine. 10 is the final answer. So the answer to question number 1 is C, 10. Question 2. The 35-member History Club is meeting to choose a student government representative. The members decided that the representative who will be chosen at random cannot be one of the 3 officers in the club. What is the probability that Hiroko, who is a member of the club but not an officer, will be chosen? So what's the probability I get that one individual person? What we do is we take a fraction, the total number of outcomes that Hiroko, that we choose Hiroko, there's only one choice for that, over, since there's 35 members, but 3 of them are officers who cannot be chosen, that's going to be over 32. So that is the probability that Hiroko will be chosen. He is one member out of the 32 they're choosing from at random. And so the answer to question number 2 is K, 1 over 32. Question 3. For what value of x is the equation 2 to the power 2x plus 7 equal to 2 to the power 15 true? Since we have the same bases, we can just set the exponents equal. So this equation is going to be true when the exponents are equal. So 2x plus 7 is equal to 15. And then solve that using standard methods. We start by subtracting 7 from both sides. That gives me 2x is equal to 8. Then I divide both sides by 2, which gives me x is equal to 4. So the value of x that makes the equation true is x equals 4. And that means the answer to question 3 is option B. Question 4. Let the function f be defined as f of x is equal to 5x squared minus 7 times the quantity 4x plus 3. What is the value of f of 3? So we're replacing the x variable with the number 3. We get 5 times 3 squared minus 7 times 4 times 3 plus 3. Notice where I put those parentheses. So what happens is we have to do order of operations. I can plug this all into one line on my calculator if I want, as long as I have the correct position on the parentheses. But if you're doing this by hand, you would take 5, 3 squared is 9, so that's 5 times 9 minus 7. In these parentheses, 4 times 3 plus 3 will give you 15. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15. 5 times 9 minus 7 times 15, multiply, and then subtract, you get negative 60. So negative 60 is the answer to question number 4, and that is option J. Question 5. A wallet containing 5 $5 bills, 7 $10 bills, and 8 $20 bills is found and returned to its owner. The wallet's owner will reward the finder with 1 bill drawn at random from the wallet. What is the probability that the bill drawn will be a $20 bill? So the probability of drawing the $20 bill is what we're looking for. Just like in the first question, I have to decide how many options I have total. Since there's 5 $5, 7 $10, and 8 $20, that's 20 bills total. So we're picking out of 20. Of those 20 bills, 8 of those are $20 bills. So my probability is 8 out of 20. Now this is going to simplify. Both of things are divisible by 4. So we divide the top and bottom by 4. We get 2/5. So 8 over 20 is 2/5. And therefore, option D is the answer to question 5. Question 6. The ABC Book Club charges a $40 monthly fee plus $2 per book read in that month. The Easy Book Club charges a $35 monthly fee plus $3 per book read that month. For each club, how many books must be read in 1 month for the total charges from each club to be equal? So basically, we need to figure out when the fees are equal. So the ABC is $40 plus $2 times the number of books. I'll call that N, number of books. The Easy Book Club is a $35 fee plus $3 times the number of books. So that's the equation I can set up and solve. What I'll do is I'll subtract 35 from both sides. If I do that, I get 5 plus 2n is equal to 3n. Then I would subtract 2n from both sides, giving me n equals 5. So the number of books you would have to read in a month for the fees to be equal is 5 books. And that is option H. So H is the correct answer to question 6. Question 7. In parallelogram ABCD below, AC is a diagonal. The measure of ABC is 40 degrees as shown, and the measure of ACD is 57 degrees. What is the measure of CAD? Now, In this case, so we're looking for this angle here. Because it is a parallelogram, these two lines are equal. BC and AD are parallel, and CD and BA are also parallel. So I said equal before, but I meant parallel. So BC, AD are parallel. BA, CD are parallel. That means this angle at D over here, so the angle at D, is going to have to be the same angle as the angle at B. So D also has to be 40 degrees. Now, if you look at CAD, the angle here, plus ACD, the angle here, plus the angle at D, those three angles form a triangle, triangle ACD. And I'm going to simplify the notation there. Because these form a triangle, because ACD forms a triangle, the three angles have to add up to 180 degrees. I don't know what the angle at A is, but it told me that the angle at C is 57 degrees. And we just said that the angle at D is 40 degrees. So we get A plus 57 plus 40 is equal to 180. And so I can find A by taking 180 and subtracting 57 degrees and subtracting 40 degrees. When you do that, you get that the angle at A is going to be 83 degrees. Therefore, the answer to question number 7 is D, 83 degrees. Question 8. When x is equal to 1/2, what is the value of 8x minus 3? So again, all we're doing is replacing the x value with the number 1/2. So 8 times 1/2 minus 3 is in the numerator, and the denominator is going to be 1/2. Be careful when you divide by a fraction. The top piece is pretty easy to do. 8 times 1/2 is 4, then minus 3. 4 minus 3 gives you 1. 1 divided by 1/2, you can multiply by the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2, so like 1 times 2. Or you can divide by 1/2. If you do divide by 1/2 and type it into your calculator, make sure that you put parentheses around the 1/2. But however you do that, you end up with 2. So 2 is the final answer, which means G, option G, is the correct answer to question 8. Question 9. In the standard XY coordinate plane, what is the midpoint of the line segment that has endpoints 3, 8 and 1, -4? Well, if we're looking for a midpoint on a line segment, basically what we do is we average the x values. So we take the x value of our first point plus the x value of our second point and divide that by 2. That becomes the average for the midpoint, or excuse me, the x value for the midpoint. Then I do the same thing with y values. So the y value of 0.1 plus the y value of 0.2 divided by 2, that's the average of the y values. And that's going to be the midpoint. In our case, if we average the x values, we're averaging 1 and 3. So take 1 plus 3 over 2. That's going to be the x value of the midpoint. And then we average the y values. The y values are 8 and -4. So 8 plus -4, whoops, divided by 2. And that's the point we're looking for. 1 plus 3, make sure you add that before you divide. You get 4 divided by 2, which is 2. 8 plus negative 4, that's a 2. Or excuse me, that's a 4. Divided by 2 gives you a 2 as well. So we end up with x value of 2, y value of 2 as the midpoint, and that means option D is the correct answer to question 9. Question 10. The fluctuation of water depth at the pier is shown in the figure below. One of the following values gives the positive difference in feet between the greatest water depth and the least water depth shown in the graph. So the greatest water depth, it looks like, is, I'm just freehand sketching this, it looks like is 12. The lowest water depth, it looks like, is 6. And so if we're looking for the greatest, excuse me, if we're looking for the difference, so we're looking for the positive difference in the greatest and the lowest, all we would do is take 12 minus 6, and that is equal to 6. So 6 is the answer to question 10, and that is option G. Question 11. What is the slope of the line through point -2, 1 and point 2, -5 in the standard XY coordinate plane? So slope formula is the y value of 0.2 minus the y value of 0.1 divided by the x value of 0.2 minus the x value of 0.1. That's the slope formula between any 2 points. The y value of the second point is a -5. So we take -5, subtract the y value of the first point is 1. Then in the denominator, we take the x value of the second point, which is a +2, minus the x value of the first point, which is a -2. What I end up getting is a fraction of -6 divided by a +4, and that actually simplifies to a -3/2. So -3/2 is the slope of the line through those 2 points. And that means the answer to question 11 is option D. Question 12. In Cherokee County, the fine for speeding is $17 for each mile per hour the driver is traveling over the posted speed limit. In Cherokee County, Kirk was fined $221 for speeding on a road with a posted speed of 30 miles per hour. Kirk was fined for traveling at what speed in miles per hour? So all we need to do is take the $221 total fine and divide that by 17. When I do that, I get 13. So if each mile per hour over the speed limit is a $17 charge, then Kirk traveled 13 miles per hour over the speed limit. It doesn't ask us for what he was, excuse me, the miles per hour over the speed limit, but rather it asked me for how fast was he traveling, like what was his speed. Since the speed limit is 30 miles per hour, we tack that 13 on to the 30 miles per hour, and get that Kirk was traveling at 43 miles per hour. So the answer to question 12 is H, 43. Question 13. What is the sum of the solutions of the two equations below? So it's asking us to solve each equation. 8x is equal to 12. We divide both sides by 8. If I do that, 12 over 8 is 3/2, simplified. Then what I would do is I would solve 2y plus 10 is equal to 22. Subtract 10 from both sides. We get 2y is equal to 12. Divide both sides by 2, you get y is equal to 6. So we have x is equal to 3/2 or 1.5 or 1.5, and y is equal to 6. It asks us for the sum of those solutions. So taking x plus y means I take 1.5, excuse me, and then add 6 to that, which gives me a 7.5. So 7.5 is the answer to question 13, and that is option B. So 7.5 is the answer to question 13. That's option B. Question 14. The average of 5 distinct scores has the same value as the median of 5 scores. The sum of the 5 scores is 420. What is the sum of the 4 scores that are not the median? So if we're averaging and 5 of those, that means, that when we take the 5 scores, add them up, I'll add them in least to greatest. So A plus B plus C plus D plus E, whatever those 5 scores are, the average is the same as the median. By the way, if I put these in numerical order, the middle number, C, is going to be the median. Okay? So the average of the 5 is going to be the same as the median. If I drop out, or excuse me, the sum of the 5 scores, sum of those 5 scores is 420. So 420 divided by 5 is 84, and that is the median, and I'm calling the median C here. Then it asks me, what's the sum of the 4 scores that are not the median? So if I took the A plus the B plus the D plus the E, well, I know that if I add 84 to that, I get 420. So that's going to be 420, subtract 84, which gives me 336. So 336 is the sum of the 4 scores that are not the median. Again, I'm calling C the median. You can call it whatever you want. So 336 is the correct answer to 14, and that is option H. Question 15. What is the value of the expression below? In this expression, I have to work inside out. -8 plus 4 is a -4, but that's inside of an absolute value. 3 minus 9 is going to be a -6, but once again, that is inside the absolute value. So if I take the absolute value of -4, I get a +4. Absolute value of -6 is a 6, so that's going to be 4 minus 6. which is the absolute value of -2, which is a +2. So +2 is the answer to question 15, and that is option D. Question 16. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to 2 divided by, or excuse me, x to the power 2/3? Well, there's a number of different ways you can see this, but basically, one way to see this is to take x squared and raise that whole thing to the 1/3 power. And if you know anything about third powers, that is a third root. So we're taking a third root of the x squared. And it turns out that's one of my options. Specifically, that's option K. So K is the correct answer for question 16. Question 17. The standard XY coordinate plane, in the standard XY coordinate plane, what is the slope of the line given by the equation 4x is equal to 7y plus 5? Now, what I would do is I would get that equation into slope-intercept form, specifically y equals mx plus b, because then the m, the coefficient of the x, is going to be my slope. So if I have it this way, that's what I get. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take 7y plus 5. I'm going to write that on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, I'll write the 4x. Now to put this into slope-intercept form, the first thing I would do is subtract 5 from both sides. And then the second thing I would do is divide both sides by 7. So y is equal to 4/7 times x minus 5/7. And so that means that the slope, that's the m in y equals mx plus b, is 4/7. So 4/7 is the correct answer to question 17, and that is option B. Question 18. For which of the following conditions will the sum of integers m and n always be an odd integer? So we want m plus n to be an odd integer. Well, if m is an odd integer, that's not always guaranteed that if I add another number, I get an odd integer. In fact, I could take an odd number like 5 and add it to 3 and get an 8. Same is true for n being an odd integer. If n is odd, then you add, like again, 5 plus 3 becomes 8. If m and n are both odd, again, 5 plus 3 is 8. That's not going to work. If m and n are both even, something like 10 plus 12 is going to give me 22. That's not going to work. But option K, m is odd, n is even. Anytime m is odd and n is even, we will get an odd integer. So the answer there is that option K is the correct answer, because whenever m is odd and n is even, we get an odd integer. So the answer to question 18 is K. Question 19. The lengths of the two legs of a right triangle ABC shown below are given in inches. The midpoint of AB is how many inches from A? So how many inches from A? Basically what we're going to do is we're going to find the length of AB. The way we do that is by using the Pythagorean theorem, which says a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, on a right triangle. In this case, well, in all right triangles, A and B represent the lengths of the legs. C represents the length of the hypotenuse. So we take 32 squared plus 24 squared is equal to our hypotenuse squared. I'll just call that C. Let's not call that C. Let's call it H for hypotenuse because I have a different C over here. When that's done, we get 1600 is equal to the hypotenuse squared. So the length of the hypotenuse is the square root of 1600, which happens to be 40. So the length of the hypotenuse is 40. That means that the midpoint is going to be 20 units away from A and 20 units away from B. So the midpoint is 20 units away from point A. Okay. So the answer to question 19 is option B, 20. Question 20. In triangle DEF, the length of DE is the square root of 30 inches, and the length of EF is 3 inches. If it can be determined, what is the length in inches of side DF? So I have length DE, and I have length EF, and we're asked to find length DF. Notice that we're not given any angles. And to make a long story short, if I don't have angles, just having the lengths of two sides is not going to determine the length of the third side. So the answer to question 20 is K. Now let me draw you a picture just so that we're all on the same page of what's going on. So here I've dumped two different triangles in here, but square root of 30 is about 5.48 inches. So that's where I wrote DE, length of about 5.48, and then EF's length of 3. Well, if this angle is bigger, then DF is going to be longer. If this angle is shorter, then the DF is going to be a lot shorter, okay? So because of that, because I don't know any angles, I can't determine the length of DF. So again, K is the answer to question 20. Question 21. Laura plans to paint an 8-foot high rectangular walls of her rooms. Paint the 8-foot high rectangular walls of rooms. And before she buys paint, she needs to know the area of the wall surface to be painted. Two walls are 10 feet wide. The other two walls are 15 feet wide. The combined area of one window and one door in her room is 60 square feet. What is the area in square feet of the wall surface Laura plans to paint? Well, surface, since all of the heights of the wall are 8 foot high, or all the walls are 8 foot high, then the total area is going to be, well, since she has two walls that are 10 feet wide, she's going to have two walls that are 10 feet wide by 8 feet tall. She's also going to have another two walls that are 15 feet wide by 8 feet tall. And then she can subtract out the number of square feet for the window and doors, which is 60. So the area is going to be 2 times 10 times 8 plus 2 times 15 times 8 minus 60. You can write that in a number of different ways, but the total area, when you type that into your calculator, comes out to 340 square feet. So 340 is the correct answer to question 21, and that is option B. Question 22. The length of a rectangle is 5 inches longer than the width. The perimeter of the rectangle is 40 inches. What is the width of the rectangle in inches? So, couple of interesting tidbits here. The length of a rectangle is 5 inches longer than the width. I'd say that means L is equal to W plus 5, where L is the length, W means the width. Now, the perimeter of a rectangle is going to be 2L plus 2W. We know that the perimeter is 40, so 40 is equal to 2L plus 2W. But because the length is 5 feet more than the width, I can replace that L with the expression W plus 5 from this equation. So replace the L with W plus 5, and then we can solve for the width of this rectangle. We end up with 40 is equal to 2 times W plus 10 plus 2 times W. Subtracting 10 from both sides would give you 30 on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you would get 4W. So 30 is equal to 4W. Dividing both sides by 4 gives you that the width of this rectangle has to be 7.5 inches. Now I can stop there if I want to. By the way, if you wanted to, you could also get the length by just plugging in 7.5 in for the width here. 7.5 plus 5 is 12.5. But it's only asking me for the width, so I'm perfectly okay stopping here. Option F, 7.5, is the answer to question 22. Question 23. 8% of 60 is 1/5 of what number? 8% of 60 is 0.08 times 60. That's going to be 1/5 of some number. And so I end up with 0.08 times 60 is equal to 1/5 times whatever that number is. I'll put n for the variable. 0.08 times 60 is 4.8. And then I would multiply both sides by 5 to get that 24 is equal to the number we're looking for. So 24 is equal to the number, and therefore option C is the correct answer to question 23. Question 24. Armin is trying to decide whether to buy a season pass for college basketball teams' 20 home games this season. The cost of an individual ticket is $14, and the cost of a season pass is $175. The season pass will admit Armin to any home basketball game at no additional cost. What is the minimum number of home games Armin must attend this season in order for the cost of a season pass to be less than the cost of buying individual tickets for each game he attends? So he's going to attend, we'll call it X number of games at $14 a piece if he does not buy a season ticket. If he does buy a season ticket, then he's going to spend $15. So the number of games he would have to attend to make both equal is found by taking 14x equals 175. We're not asked to find the number of games it costs for him to have equal pay, we're asked to find how many games would he have to attend until the 175 is actually smaller than the 14 times x. Dividing both sides by 14 gives you x has to be greater than 12.5. And what that means is that if Armin attends 12 games, then it's going to be cheaper to buy individual tickets. If he attends 13 games or more, then the season pass will be better. So he must attend 13 games or more for the season pass to be cheaper. So 13 is the correct answer for question 24, and that is option J. Question 25, 4.8 times 10 to the negative 7th is divided by 1.6 times 10 to the negative 11th is equal to what? So what I would end up doing is take 4.8, dividing that by 1.6, and then taking 10 raised to the negative 7th power, dividing that by 10 raised to the negative 11th power. When you take the 4.8 divided by 1.6, you end up with 3, or just 3.0. That's your option here. Rules of exponents say that what you would have to do in the exponent is, since we have the same base here, is take negative 7 minus a negative 10. That is the quotient rule of exponents. Excuse me, negative 7 minus negative 11. That's the quotient rule for exponents. Negative 7 minus negative 11 is negative 7 plus 11, which is a 4. You can also do that by thinking of negative exponents as reciprocals of numbers with positive exponents. So multiply times 10 to the 11th power on both top and bottom. In any case, we get 3.0 times 10 to the 4th power, which is option A. So A is the correct answer to question 25. Question 26. A circle in the standard XY coordinate plane has center of negative 1, 2, and passes through point 2, 6. Line segment AB is a diameter of the circle. What are the coordinates of point B? Well, for this one, this is actually realizing that the center of the circle is the midpoint of line segment AB. So that means that the negative 1, which is the x value of the center, is going to be the x value of point B plus the x value of point A divided by 2. Again, I'm assuming that the B is some point x comma y. We're looking for the coordinates there. So that gives us what we end up with here for the x value. For the y value, 2 has to be the midpoint. So if I take the y value of point B plus the y value of point A and divide by 2, I should end up getting a 2 as well. So let's just solve these two equations. Then the first one, I'd multiply both sides by 2. I'd get -2 is equal to x plus 2. In the second equation, when I multiply both sides by 2, I get 4 is equal to y plus 6. In the first equation, subtract 2 from both sides, we get x is equal to -4. In the second equation, I'd subtract 6 from both sides, and that would give me the y value is equal to -2. So the xy coordinates for point B are -4, -2. And therefore the option H is the correct answer to question 26. Question 27. Which of the following expressions is a factor of x to the third minus 64? Now, there's long ways to do this and shorter ways to do this. Okay? So the long way to do this is to divide each using long division. You can do that in a little bit shorter way by doing synthetic division for part A, B, and C and seeing if we get a remainder. So we do long division, see if we get a remainder, do synthetic division and see if we get a remainder. But there's also another way to do this for parts A, B, and C. It turns out if you divide a polynomial by x minus r, then we're going to get another polynomial called the quotient plus a remainder. Actually, let me just use a different letter for x minus r. Let's say x minus some number a. Then I'm going to get a quotient plus a remainder. And it turns out that the remainder is going to be the same thing you get when you plug in that a into the polynomial. So for parts A, B, and C, we have like this x minus a number. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the A value in options A, B, and C and see what happens. So take x to the third minus 64. And for option A, since we have dividing by x minus 4, I'm going to plug in 4 in for the x value and see what the remainder gives me. Well, that is 0, it turns out. And therefore, I know that x minus 4 is going to divide the polynomial nicely without a remainder. So when I use a 4, my remainder is going to be 0, and then I'm done. Therefore, option A is the correct answer. Now, normally I would stop right here. But you can also, if you wanted to, try this out for option B as well. With option B, the A is going to have to be a -4. So I'd plug in a -4, cube that, and then subtract 64. That gives me a -128, which is obviously not 0. So when I divide my polynomial x to the third minus 64, I'm going to get a remainder of -128. So it's not going to divide it nicely. And so x plus 4 is not going to be a factor. And I can do the same thing with option C. With option C, what I would do is I'd plug in a negative 64 and then cube that and then subtract 64. That is not equal to 0. So I don't get a nice 0 remainder there either. By the way, that's a really big number, like negative 262, 208. Okay, so obviously that doesn't work either. So option A is the correct answer. For D and E, you could use long division to check those. You could use common roots if you wanted to. 4i is a root, is a solution for D. So you could plug in 4i and check that if you wanted. And you could check solutions for E as well. Again, I'm not going to do that. All we really needed to see was that when we plugged in a positive 4, we got a 0. That means when I take the polynomial x to the third minus 64, divide it by x minus 4, I'm going to get a quotient and no remainder. So x minus 4 is going to be a factor of x to the third minus 64. Again, there's other ways to look at that as well. Question 28. The average of a list of 4 numbers is 90. A new list of 4 numbers has the same 3 first numbers as the original list, but the 4th number in the original list is 80, and the 4th number in the new list is 96. What is the average of the new list of numbers? So basically, let's do an old and a new. So the old list was A plus B plus C plus 80. Oh. If I average that, I know that I got 90. So the average of the old is 90. The new list has the same first 3 numbers, but the 4th number is now a 96. And I'm looking for the average of that new list. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break that 96 up into 80 plus 16. And now we know that the new list's average is going to be the same as the old list's average plus 16 over 4, which is 4. So we're going to have the new list having an average of 90 plus 4, which is 94. So 94 is the correct answer to question 28, and that is option H. Question 29. The number A is located at negative 2.5 on the number line below. One of the following number lines shows the location of A squared. Which number line is it? Well, all we have to do is take negative 2.5 and square it. When you take negative 2.5 and square it, make sure the negative's on the inside. That's just 6.25. And so that should be a slightly above 6. And the only option that gives us slightly above 6 is option E. So E is the correct answer as far as how you draw that on a number line. So that's the answer to question 29. Question 30. Maria ordered a pizza. She ate only 2/9 of it and gave the remaining pizza to her 3 brothers. What fraction of the whole pizza will each of Maria's brothers receive if they share the remaining pizza equally? So if she ate 2/9, then 7/9 of the pizza is left. She needs to take that 7/9 and she's going to split it between her three brothers. So each of her three brothers are going to get a third of that. 1/3 of 7/9 is 7/27. And so each of her brothers will get 7/27 or 7/27 of the pizza. So J is the correct answer to question 30. Question 31. The number 1001 is the product of prime numbers 7, 11, and 13. Knowing this, what is the prime factorization of 30,030? So first off, realize that 30,030 is just 30 times 7 times 11 times 13. Or I shouldn't say that. I apologize. 30 times 1001, and we know that 1001 is 7 times 11 times 13. So to get the prime factorization of 30,030, I just need to break down 30. And 30 is going to be 2 times 3 times 5. And then we still have the 7. We still have the 11. We still have the 13. So that's what we end up with. The prime factorization is 2 times 3 times 5 times 7 times 11 times 13. And that is option E. So the correct answer for question 31 is E. Again, we need to break down the 30 into prime numbers. Questions 32 through 34 will use this diagram. It says Micaiah, an intern at Parks and Rec Department, is developing a proposal for a new trapezoidal Springdale Park. The figure below shows her scale drawing with 3 side lengths and the radius of the merry-go-round given in inches. In Micaiah's scale drawing, 1 inch represents 1.5 feet. So we're going to use this scale drawing where 1 inch represents 1.5 feet. Question 32. What is the area in square inches of the scale drawing of the park? So we're asked to find the area of this drawing in square inches. Now there's a lot of different ways that we can go about this. One way is to break up this trapezoid into a triangle and a rectangle. Notice that the rectangle is going to be 28 inches by 16 inches. The triangle is going to have base of 12 inches and height of 16 inches. And it's a right triangle, so those are the side lengths. Therefore, if I want to find the total area, I take the area of the triangle, that's 1/2 base times height. The base, like I said, is 12. The height is 16. Plus the area of the rectangle, which is going to be 28 times 16. If you do that, you end up with 544 square inches. So the answer to question 32 is 544. Now, the other way you can do this is to remember the area of a trapezoid. The area of a trapezoid is the height of the trapezoid multiplied times the sum of the two bases. So 40 plus 28 or 28 plus 40. Whoops. And then divide that by 2. And if you remember, that's the area of a trapezoid. You can do that as well. That is 544 square inches as well. So either way you do that, you think of a triangle plus a rectangle, or you remember the area of a trapezoid. Both cases give you 544 square inches. So the answer to question 32 is 544 square inches. Question 33. Micaiah's proposal includes installing a fence on the perimeter of the park. What is the perimeter in feet of the park? I'm going to first off find the perimeter in inches. And since we know that each inch represents 1.5 feet, then I'll multiply by 1.5 to get the number of feet. So I go back and look at this, and the perimeter is going to be 28 plus 16 plus 40 plus the length of this side. We already saw that this side is the hypotenuse of a triangle with one side of length 12 inches, the other side of length 16 inches. So this is a right triangle with bases of 12 and 16. So I can find the hypotenuse of that right triangle for finding the length there. So the first thing I'll do is find the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse squared is equal to, like I said, 12 squared plus 16 squared. When I take 12 squared plus 16 squared, I get 400. So the hypotenuse there is length 20. Take the square root of 400. So that means the perimeter in inches is going to be equal to the 28 plus the 16 plus the 40, and then plus the hypotenuse of 20 inches. So that becomes 104 inches. That's inches in the scale drawing. To convert that to actual feet in the real world, since 1 inch represents 1.5 feet in the real world, what I would do is take 1.5 times that 104 that I just got. So 1.5 times 104 becomes 156 feet as the perimeter. By the way, if you wanted to convert everything into feet first and then find the hypotenuse, you could do that as well. But the perimeter in feet is 156 feet. Question 34. The length of the south side of the park is what percent of the length of the north side? So the south side of the park equals what percent times the north side of the park? What percent of the north side of the park? Now, the south side of the park is this bottom. Notice we have this orientation key. So south side is 40 inches. North side is 20 inches, 28 inches, excuse me. So the south side is what percent of the north side? South side is 40. Is what percent of that 28? Divide both sides by 28. 40 divided by 28 is equal to 140, excuse me, 1.42857 dot dot dot. That is the numerical value. When I put that as a percentage, that's 142.2857 dot 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 percent. Okay. And 142 and some change percent. Oh, I apologize. I had an extra 2 in there. 142.857%. That's option H. That's 142 and 6/7. So there we go. The answer to question 34 is H, 142 and 6/7. That's the end of that diagram. In the next few questions, specifically questions 35 through 37, we're going to use this diagram. The Smith family is planning to build a 3-room cabin, which consists of 2 bedrooms, 1 living room. Shown below are the rectangular floor plan on the left and a side view of the cabin on the right. In the side view, the roof forms an isosceles triangle, ABC isosceles triangle. The walls are perpendicular to the level floor. AC, that's this roof line, and ED are parallel. And then F is the midpoint of A to C. And BF and AC are perpendicular. So BF perpendicular with AC. Then it says at the bottom, during the week, the Smiths plan to roof the cabin. There is a 20% chance of rain each day. So that's a lot of stuff to process. You don't have to memorize these pictures to do these problems, but we'll just go back and reference them. Question 35. Mr. Smith plans to build a 3-foot walkway around the outside of the cabin as shown in the floor plan. What will be the area in square feet of the top surface of the walkway? So as shown in this floor plan, that's the gray around the house. That's the walkway. That's the 3-foot wide walkway. And you'll notice that the longer length is 30 feet. The shorter length is 24 because we had to subtract 3 on the left-hand side and subtract 3 on the right-hand side. So if I want to figure out the square foot of the walkway, all I'm going to do is take the area of the outside rectangle minus the area of this inside rectangle. So the area of the walkway is the area of the outside rectangle. The outside rectangle has 36-foot length and 30-foot width. So if I take 36 times 30, that'll give me the outside area rectangle. And then I'm going to subtract the inside area rectangle. That has length of 30, as seen over here, and width of 24. So then I can do that subtraction and end up with 360 square feet. So the area of the walkway is 360 square feet. Question 36. Mrs. Smith will install a ceiling fan in each room of the cabin and will place curtains over the 4 windows. Each of the ceiling fans has a price of $52. The price of curtains for each small window is $39.50, and the price of curtains for each large window is twice that for the small window. Based on this information, which of the following values is closest to the total price Mrs. Smith will pay for curtains and ceiling fans? Now, just before we start, price of large curtains is going to be the cost for the small curtains, but doubled. So it's going to be twice the $39.50. Which is equal to $79. So price of a set of large curtains is $79. Price of a set of small is $39.50. And the price of each ceiling fan is $52. So let's look up how many ceiling fans we need and how many curtains we need. So she's going to install a ceiling fan in each room. So we got to figure out how many rooms there are. We reference this drawing. Notice there are two bedrooms and 1 large room. So that's 3 ceiling fans that she'll need. Now look at the windows. There are 3 small windows and 1 large window. So 1 large window and then 3 small windows. And so if I put that all together, then the total price is going to be 3 ceiling fans at $52 a piece, plus 3 curtains for small windows at $39.50 a piece, plus 1 set of curtains for the large window, which we said is $79. And so the total amount of money would be $353.50. $353.50. So which of the following values is closest? Well, there's no $353.50 here, but there is a $354. So $354 would be the closest value, and that is option J. Question 37. Mr. and Mrs. Smith plan to roof the cabin on 2 consecutive days. Assuming that the chance of rain is independent of the day, what's the probability it will rain both days? This just goes back to that very last line that says that there is a 20% chance of rain each day. So what is the probability that we get rain on day 1 and then also rain on day 2? Well, if you have a 20% chance on day 1, you take 0.2. And then if we have a 20% chance on day 2, that's another 0.2. Since these are independent, we would multiply those. 0.2 times 0.2 is 0.04. And so the probability that it will rain on both days is 0.04. So the answer to question 37 is option A. So those are the three questions for the diagram. Now we move on to the other questions. Question 38. Which of the following expressions, when evaluated, equals an irrational number? So you can do this in a lot of different ways. One quick way is just to type all these into your calculator and see what you get. And if you did that, you'd type all these into your calculator and you'd see that K is the only one that turns out irrational. So you could be all done by just typing into your calculator. Now, if you wanted to do this by hand, what I would do is I would suggest noticing that the square root of 8 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times 2. Square root of 4 is 2. So square root of 8 is actually 2 times the square root of 2. So that means when you're looking at option F, what that is really the square root of 2 divided by 2 times the square root of 2. The square roots would cancel each other out, and you'd be left with the rational number of 1/2. Option G would be, well, it'd be the opposite. It'd be the reciprocal of option F. So it'd be 2 times the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2. Square root of 2's would cancel each other out, and you'd be left with a 2. Knowing how square roots squared works tells you how option H turns out. The square root of 8 squared just becomes an 8. Anytime you take a square root of something squared, as long as that something inside is positive, you get the number back. Option J is the square root of 2 multiplied times 2 times the square root of 2. By the way, root 2 times root 2 is just 2. So you end up with 2 times 2, which is 4. Again, notice all of these options, F, G, H, and J, all turn out to be rational numbers. The only one that doesn't is option K, because that's the square root of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 2. So you end up with 3 times the square root of 2, which is irrational. So the only irrational number that we have here is option K. So K is the answer to question 38. Question 39. A line through the origin and point 10,4 is shown in the standard XY coordinate plane below. The acute angle between the line and the positive x-axis has measure theta. What is the value of the tangent of theta? Now, in order to figure out the value of the tangent of theta, the nice mnemonic to remember is SOHCAHTOA. And the tangent part comes from the last 3 letters. The tangent of an angle, we'll call it theta, is equal to the opposite side length divided by the adjacent side length in a right triangle. And you may say, well, where's your right triangle here? My right triangle is found by just taking that point 10,4 and dropping perpendicular to the x-axis. Notice that we have a length side of this right triangle, length 10, which is adjacent to the theta. and length 4, which is opposite of the theta. And therefore, the tangent of that theta is going to be 4 divided by 10, which reduces to 2/5. Therefore, the answer to question 39 is option D, which is 2/5. Question 40. The equation absolute value of 2x minus 8 plus 3 is equal to 5 has 2 solutions. Those solutions are equal to solutions to which of the following pairs of equations? Now, if you notice that these pairs of equations all have the property that there's 2 terms on the left, 1 number on the right. So the first thing I would do to solve 2x minus 8 inside of absolute values plus 3 is equal to 5. The first thing I would do to solve that is to subtract 3 from both sides. I'm going to do that on my own. So we get absolute value of 2x minus 8 is equal to 2. Now that means this thing inside could either be equal to a 2 or this thing inside could be equal to a negative 2. Another way to say that is that either the 2x minus 8 could be equal to a 2 or the opposite of 2x minus 8 could have been equal to a 2. And these are my two equations. 2x minus 8 is equal to 2, or the opposite of 2x minus 8 is equal to 2. Make sure you put parentheses around the 2x minus 8 there when I put the opposite, the negative sign out front of it. In any case, these two equations are exactly the two equations we get in option K. So the answer to question 40 is option K. Question 41. The frequency chart below shows the cumulative number of Mrs. Hernandez's science students whose test scores fell within certain score ranges. All test scores are whole numbers. How many students have a test score in the interval from 71 to 80? So if there are 13 students between 65 and 80, and there are 12 students between 65 and 70, that means, well, of these 13, 12 of them had to be between 65 and 70, and therefore only one is between 71 and 80. So one student scored between 71 and 80, and therefore the answer to question 41 is option A, 1. Question 42. The number of decibels produced by an audio source can be modeled by the equation D equals 10 log of I over K, where I is the sound intensity and K is a constant. How many decibels are produced by an audio source whose intensity is 1,000 times the value of K? So what we would do is take 10 times log, and then if the intensity is 1,000 times K, then what we're doing is we're taking 10 times the log of 1,000. Now this is log base 10. When you don't see a base there, log means log base 10. You can type this into your calculator. What that's going to be is 10. What you're going to get here is 3. So 10 times 3, which is 30. So the number of decibels is going to be 30, and that is option G. So the answer to 42 is G, which is 30. Question 43. Mario plays basketball on a town league team. The table below gives Mario's scoring statistics for last season. How many points did Mario score playing basketball last season? So what we would do is we'd count up all the points. He took a 1-point free throw 80 times, and he was successful 75% of the time. That means he hit 1 point 75% of that 80. So 1 times 80 times 0.75 would give the number of points that he got from 1-point attempts. Then we could do the same thing for 2-point attempts. He attempted 60 and he hit 90% of those. Again, 2 times 60 times 0.9. And then he attempted 3-point field goals 60 times, and he hit 25% of those. So that's going to give me the total of number of points that Mario scored. If you want to do the actual calculations, 75% of 80 means he hit 60 1-point shots. 90% of 60 means that he hit 54 2-point shots. And 25% of 60 means that he hit 15 3-point shots. When you add those all up, that gives you 213 total points. So the answer to question 43 is C, 213. Question 44. The graph of y equals absolute value of x minus 6 in the standard xy coordinate plane is in the standard xy coordinate plane. Which of the following transformations, when applied to the graph y equals absolute value of x, results in the graph of y equals absolute value of x minus 6? So in other words, how can we transform y equals absolute value of x into y equals absolute value of x minus 6, where the x minus 6 is both are the x and the minus 6 part are both inside the absolute value. Well, when you're moving things around, when you're adjusting the x, you're moving things right or left. And it turns out that when you replace x with x minus h, what you're doing is you're moving h units horizontally. In this case, we're doing x minus 6. So what that means is that I'm moving 6 units horizontally. Since that's a positive 6, it's going to be 6 units to the right. So we're going to be translating right 6 coordinate units, and that is option F. So option F is the answer to question 44. We're moving 6 units to the right. Question 45. Toby wants to find the volume of a solid toy soldier. He fills a rectangular container 8 centimeters long, 6 centimeters wide, and 10 centimeters high with water to a depth of 4 centimeters. Toby totally submerges the soldier in the water. The height of the water with the submerged soldier is 6.6 centimeters. Which of the following is closest to the volume in cubic centimeters of the toy soldier? So here's the deal. Let me draw this picture and what's going on. So the picture is something like this. The container is 8 centimeters long, 6 centimeters wide, and it's technically 10 centimeters high, but we only care about how deep the water is. The water is 4 centimeters high. When he throws the toy soldier in, then the water level rises from 4 to 6.6. So if we're looking at the volume of displacement, the volume of displacement is going to be the 8 times the 6 times the rise in water level, which since we went from 4 to 6.6 is 2.6. All of this is in centimeters. So from there, that's what we got. And that volume, by the way, is 124.8. That would be in cubic centimeters. The closest to that is A, which is 125. So the answer to 45 is A, 125. Question 46. A box in the shape of a cube has an interior side length of 18 inches and is used to ship a right circular cylinder with radius of 6 inches and height of 12 inches. The interior of the box not occupied by the cylinder is filled with packing material. Which of the following numerical expressions gives the number of cubic inches of the box filled with packing material? So what we would need to do is to take the volume of a cube and subtract the volume of a cylinder. And that's what we're going to do. So the volume of a cube is the side length times the side length times the side length. The volume of a cylinder is going to be the area of the circle on the base of the cylinder, which is pi times the radius squared, times the height of the cylinder. So the volume of the packing material is going to be 18 cubed minus pi. Since the radius of the cylinder is 6 inches, we get 6 squared times the height of the cylinder, which is 12. And whoops. So the total volume of the packing material is 18 raised to the third power minus pi times 6 squared times 12. That is option J. And so J is the correct answer to question 46. Question 47. A room has a rectangular floor that is 15 feet by 21 feet. What is the area of the floor in square yards? Now, what I'm going to do is convert the length and width into yards. So the area being 15 feet, the area is going to be length times width or width times length. Since It is 15 feet by 21 feet. Since there are 3 yards in a foot, if I convert 15 feet to yards, divide that by 3, we would get 5 yards. As one side of the floor, and the other side of the floor, since it's 21 feet, divide that by 3, that'd be 7 yards. 5 times 7 is 35, so we get 35 square yards as the area of this floor. And that's option B. So option B is the correct answer to question 47. Question 48. ABC cabs and Terry taxi cabs both have an initial fare of a whole number of dollars for one passenger. The fare increases a whole number of dollars at each whole number of miles traveled. The graphs below show the one passenger fares in dollars for both cab companies for trips up to 6 miles. When the fares of the two cabs are compared, what is the cheaper fare for a 5-mile trip? Now, cheaper fare for a 5-mile trip, all we're going to do is look at where the 5 miles are. 5-mile trip for the ABC cabs is a fare of $12. The 5-mile trip for the Terry taxi cabs, 5 gets you right there. That is at $9. And therefore, the cheaper fare is simply the $9. So I'm just looking at that. The cheaper fare is the $9. So G is my answer to this question, question 48. Question 49. The graph of the function consists of 3 line segments. The graph and the coordinates of the endpoints of the 3 line segments are shown in the coordinate plane below. What is the area in square units of the region bounded by the graph of y equals f of x, the positive y-axis, and the positive x-axis? So what is the area of this region? Now you can do this in a lot of different ways. Basically, you can cut this up into triangles and rectangles if you want. That's probably what I would do just to make this easier. So I take this rectangle, find the area, and then add the area of this triangle here, and add the area of this triangle. So I have 2 triangles and a rectangle that I'm adding up the areas of. Let's do that little bitty triangle here. Notice that the height of the rectangle goes up to 3. So that means this little side of the triangle is going to be a height of 1. So, and it has a base of 2. It goes from 0 over to this point, which is 2. So it has base of 2, 1/2 base times height would be 1/2 2 times 1. That's the area of the little triangle. The rectangle goes from 0, 0 over 3 units up 3 units. So not only is this a rectangle, but it's also a square. Area of a square is 3 times 3. And then that last triangle, we go from an x value of 3 to an x value of 5. So that's a base of size or length 2. And its height is going from 0 to 3. So its height is 3. When we do all the calculations, we end up with 1 plus 9 plus 3. So the area of that object is going to be 13. Again, triangle plus square plus triangle. There's other ways you can break that up as well, but I think the area of a triangle plus the area of that square plus the area of that triangle is probably the easiest way. So 13 is my answer, and that is option B. Question 50. The sum of two positive numbers is 151. The lesser number is 19 more than the square root of the greater number. What is the value of the greater number minus the lesser number? So the two numbers, I'll call them A and B, add up to 151. The lesser number, we'll call A the smaller number, is 19 more. That's going to be adding 19. 19 more than what? Than the square root of the bigger number. So that's what we have for A. And what we can do is we can replace the A in this equation with square root of B plus 19. Excuse me. So replace the A with square root of B plus 19. That gives me square root of B plus 19 plus B is equal to 151. And now I would solve this for B. I'm going to reorganize this. I'm going to put the B plus the square root of B plus 19 equals 151. And then I'm going to subtract 151 from both sides. When I do that, when I subtract from the left, I get minus 132 on the left, and then I get a 0 on the right. Now, this is in the quadratic form, where this b is like the square root of b squared. So I can actually factor this into the square root of b plus some number times the square root of b plus some other number is equal to 0. And so let's just figure out what those numbers are. What factors of negative 132 add to a 1? Well, factors of negative 132 that add to a 1 are a negative 11 and a positive 12. So what that means is that either the square root of b is equal to, or minus 11 is equal to 0, so the square root of b is equal to 11. Or the square root of b is equal to a negative 12. Obviously, it's not going to be equal to negative 12 because that would be an imaginary number. That would not make sense in the context of the problem. We need positive numbers. So that means that the square root of b is equal to 11, which if I square both sides, gives me a b value of 121. So b is 121. Remember, that was the bigger of the two numbers. If I put that into my first equation, then I see that a has to be 30. You can also put it into the second equation and see that a has to be 30 as well. So b is 121, a is 30. Now the question asked me, what is the value of the greater number minus the lesser number? So what is the value of the bigger minus the smaller? That's 121 minus 30, which is equal to 91. So 91 is the bigger minus the lesser. And that is option J. So the answer to question 50 is J, 91. Question 51. The list of numbers has a median of 25. The mode of the list of numbers is 15. To the nearest whole number, what is the mean of this list? Well, if the mode is 15, that means 15 needs to be repeated at least twice. We have one here, one copy of 15 here. So we need either the X or the Y to also be 15. I'm going to set the Y as 15. That way, our list of numbers is 41, 35, 30, X, 15, and another 15. So we have mode of 15. Now we want the median of this list to be 25. That means since the 30 and the X are going to be the two middle numbers when I order these numerically, I want the average of 30 and X to be 25. If you want 25 to be the midpoint of the 30 and the X, remember I'm heavily relying that these are from greatest to least. Multiply both sides by 2, subtract 30. That gives you an X, which is 20. So now I know all of the numbers in my set, 41, 35, 30, 20, 15, and another copy of 15. And so if I want to find the mean, all I would do is add those numbers up. I wouldn't probably write this down. I just do this in my calculator. And then divide by 6. So 41 plus 35 plus 30 plus 20 plus 15 plus another copy of 15, all divided by 6. That gives me 26. Therefore, option C is the correct answer. 26 is the mean of this set. Question 52. You are given the following system of equations where R, S, and T are integers. For which of the following will there be more than one XY solution with real number coordinates for the system? So what I would probably do is I would probably replace the Y with whatever we get when we solve this equation, the second equation for Y. So I'd start with that second equation, Rx plus Sy is equal to T. And I'd solve that for Y. We'd have Sy is equal to negative Rx plus T. Dividing both sides by S gives me Y equals negative R over S times X plus T over S. Now what I can do is I can take the equation Y equals X squared and replace that Y with the negative R over S times X plus T over S and set that equal to X squared. So that's what I would do. And now what we can do, well, is first off, I'll get all of the terms on one side and 0 on the other. So 0 is equal to x squared. Add r over s to both sides. R over s times x to both sides. Subtract t over s from both sides. That's what you end up getting. And then I'm going to multiply everything through by an s because I don't like that s in the denominator. So if I multiply the left-hand side by s, I get 0. The right-hand side, I get s times x squared plus rx minus t. So what I did is I just created a quadratic equation, and we're asking for which of the following will there be more than one solution. Quadratic formula can solve this equation. Opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. So once again, we have this quadratic equation. The solutions to this quadratic equation will be given to me by the quadratic formula, which is opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. When do I get two real number solutions in the quadratic formula? Well, I get that when the b squared minus 4ac is a positive number. When the b squared minus 4ac of the quadratic formula is a positive number, then I'll get multiple solutions. And here, the b is the coefficient of the x term. That's just r. So that's r squared minus 4 times the coefficient of the x squared term, which is x, s, excuse me, times my constant, which is my c. In this case, c is a negative t. Notice that means that we're going to get two real solutions anytime r squared plus 4st is greater than 0. Again, that came out of the quadratic formula. So r squared plus 4st greater than 0, that is option F. So when I have option F, I will have more than one solution to that system of equations. Question 53. The third and fourth terms of an arithmetic sequence are 13 and 18 respectively. What is the 50th term of that sequence? Arithmetic means that we're taking something as a start value, I'll call it S, and we're adding some m times, now let's use another letter. Let's use p times the number of terms we're at. P is going to be how many we increase each jump. Since we're going from 13 on the third term to 18 on the fourth term, I know my increase value is 5. So we're increasing 5 on each step. So we have 5n plus some starting value. Note that if you start at a -2, then when you plug in an n of 3, -2 plus 15 will give you 13. And if you did an n of 4, -2 plus 5 times 4 is -2 plus 20. That would give you 18. So my sequence is that the nth term can be calculated by -2 plus 5n. So if I'm asking what is the 50th term, That's going to be -2 plus 5 times 50. And when you calculate that, you get 248. So 248 is the 50th term of this sequence. And that is option A. Question 54. One of the following graphs in the standard XY coordinate plane is the graph of y equals sine squared x plus cosine squared x over the domain of x between -pi/2 and +pi/2. Now, this one's actually a little bit of a trick. Y equals sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x. Oops. They want you to understand that sine squared of a number plus cosine squared of a number is equal to 1. So that's the same thing as just y equals 1 between the values of -pi/2 and +pi/2. Y equals 1 is just a horizontal line, and therefore H is the answer to question 54. So H is the correct answer. That's the graph. It's the same thing as y equals 1. Question 55. What is the period of the function f of x is equal to cosecant of 4x? Now, here's the thing. Period means repeating pattern. How often does this repeat? You could graph this on your calculator if you'd like and just look at how often it repeats. But basically, cosecant normally, when our argument is x, has period of 2 pi. So does sine, so does cosine, so does secant. Tangent actually has period of pi. So having a 4x in the argument means that the period of cosecant of 4x is going to be that 2 pi all divided by 4. So we're going to divide that by 4. And that means the period of cosecant of 4x is pi/2. And so our answer is option E. So the answer to 55 is E, pi/2. Question 56. At the school carnival, Mike will play a game in which he will toss a penny, a nickel, and a dime at the same time. He will be awarded 3 points for each coin that lands on heads face up. Let the random variable x represent the number of points awarded on any toss of coins. What is the expected value of x? So he ends up winning 3 points for each heads. Now let's take the average number of heads. The average number of heads, since the probability of heads is 1/2, and he's tossing 3 coins, the average number of heads is going to be 1.5. That means that the average number of points, which is the expected number of points, is going to be, since he gets 3 points for each coin that lands on heads, the average is going to be 3 points times the 1.5 heads, which is 4.5 points. So that's the average number of points when he flips 3 coins. 4.5 is the same thing as 9 over 2. So the expected value of x, which is the average number of points, remember x stood for number of points earned on any toss of the 3 coins. So the expected value of x is 9/2 or 4.5. And that is the same thing as the average number of points. So 9/2 h is the answer to question 56. Question 57. For what positive real value of k, if any, is the determinant of the matrix equal to k? Note that the determinant of the matrix is this. So what we got to do is we got to find the determinant of that matrix. It tells what to do here, AD minus BC, where AD is on the main diagonal, BC is on the cross diagonal. So we take k times k, that's k squared, minus 3 times 4, that's 12. And when is that determinant equal to k? So when is k squared minus 12 equal to k? We can solve this. K squared, subtract k from both sides. So k squared minus k minus 12 is equal to 0. And then I can factor the left-hand side. Factors of negative 12 that add up to negative 1 are negative 4 and positive 3. So I get k minus 4 times k plus 3 equal to 0. That means that k has to be equal to 4, or k has to be equal to negative 3. Now, notice what our question is saying. For what positive real value of k is the determinant that way? The only positive number is when k is equal to 4. So the only positive real number is when k is equal to 4, and that means the answer to question 57 is option B, which is 4. Question 58. Given a positive integer n such that I to the n is equal to 1, which of the following statements about n must be true? Now, this goes back to understanding how I works. Since I squared is equal to negative 1, I raised to the 4th power is equal to positive 1. And that means if I take I to the 4th power and then raise that to any integer power, I get 1 raised to the p power, which is still just 1, right? So now let's go backwards. This means using the power rule of exponents, anytime I raise I to a power that looks like 4 times p, I get 1. And that means, well, and that's the only time. If I have different powers, I don't get 1. Okay? And that means this exponent, if I raised to the nth power is equal to 1, then n has to be 4 times p, where p is an integer. So n has to be such that when I divide it by 4, I get a remainder of 0. So n over 4 is equal to an integer with remainder of 0. So F is the correct answer to question 58. Question 59. For an angle between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2, absolute value of sine of theta is greater than or equal to 1 is true for all and only the values of theta in which of the following sets? Basically, what this is asking us to do is figure out when sine of theta is, well, sine is always between -1 and +1. The output of sine always between -1 and +1. So when is it greater than or equal to 1? It's greater than or equal to 1 whenever sine is equal to -1 or sine is equal to +1. So if I have sine of this angle, when it's equal to 1, and when is it equal to a -1 on this interval from -π/2 to +π/2? Well, it turns out that for sine to be 1, then that angle, the only way we can get a 1 is if we're at π/2. So this means that the angle theta had to be equal to pi divided by 2. If sine were to equal -1 on this interval, then that means my angle theta would have had to have been a -π/2. I can figure that out by using inverse sine. I can use some other tools as well. Whoops, forgot the negative. And therefore, the only two values where sine of theta is greater than or equal to 1 are the values where theta is π/2 and where theta is -π/2. So that is option A. And that means option A is the answer to question 59. Question 60. Ray PK bisects angle LPM. The measure of LPM is 11x degrees. The measure of LPK is 4x plus 18 degrees. What is the measure of KPM? Oftentimes, it's nice to draw a picture, so I'm going to draw a picture so I can understand this a little bit better. And then I'll drop it in to this Word document. So here's my picture here on the right. LPM is the main angle, and K is bisecting that. Now, bisecting means I cut it in half. So if I look at LPK, that's the same angle as KPM. So these two smaller angles are the same. And notice that combined, they give you the LPM. Now, LPM is 11x degrees. So the big angle is 11 times x degrees. The littler angle, one of these little angles, is 4x plus 18. That means if I take double the 4x plus 18, that should give me the same thing as 11x. I can use this now to solve for x. So solving for x would give me 11x is equal to 8x plus 36. Subtract 8x from both sides, that gives me 3x is equal to 36. Divide by 3 on both sides, and that gives me x is equal to 12. Now, 12 is not my answer. This is asking me for the angle KPM. That's going to be the same as LPK. So that's going to be the 4x plus 18. So angle KPM is equal to 4x plus 18. And now since I know my x is 12, that's going to be 4 times 12 plus 18. So angle KPM is going to be 66 degrees. Therefore, the answer to question 60 is K, 66 degrees. So that's all 60 questions from the ACT practice test. These questions were the same questions on the 2018-2019 ACT practice test, the 2019-2020 ACT practice test, and the 2020-21 ACT practice test. If you want an explanation of other ACT practice tests besides these 3 years, then I have a link to a playlist of other years for the ACT practice test in the description of this video. So you can click on that to find questions explained for other years. And lastly, if you are planning on taking the ACT soon, good luck with that. I hope this video helped you out.